Hello, my name is Angela Dorman and I am an AP Lead English teacher with the Advanced Placement Department. Today we are going to discuss some of the major components of a successful AP class. We have several guests today who are some of our best AP teachers in the district. They're going to share their ideas about how to structure the class, how to teach writing, and how to approach critical reading. We will also discuss other strategies used in the classroom to improve AP scores. AP teachers from around the district submitted questions that will drive our discussion. This will be an informal discussion, so panel, feel free to add comments after each person's answer and question. Our first question today will be, how can the AP teachers become more involved in the selection of AP students before they are enrolled in AP classes?
We have developed a program across the curriculum for every area, and we first went into all the AVID classes and talked to them, presented our program and the highlights of what it would do for the students. We then in January brought in parents and had a parent program, a presentation similar to what we took to the classes. We have made a list of all students in all classes that will be going into the class next year. If they're coming to me from a junior class, I will have all of the statistics, what their verbal scores are, how they rate in that class, and what their potential is. And then after these students are registered into the classes and have their schedules, we will have a combined meeting in the auditorium with all AP students who are registered for AP next year. And at that point, we will tell them what is expected of them, the contracts they have to sign to remain in that class, and what the prospects are for their passing the AP test the next year, coming from junior to senior or sophomore to junior. So it has helped us tremendously, or we think it will help us tremendously, to know our students long before we see them in September.
Would anyone like to add to that?
We basically do the same thing on my campus. In May, we sent out an actual all-out statement for the students who are interested in getting into the AP program, the English part of it. Mm-hmm. I get the opportunity to meet with all potential students, mm-hmm. because teaching the junior and the senior level, I keep them for a couple of years, so that's an advantage. And a lot of times the students will come from regular English classes, and we look at, of course, their PSAT scores. Mm-hmm. I meet with their previous English teacher to see exactly the type of writing skills they have, their study habits. Mm-hmm. We check all of that. We meet with parents before the school year ends as well. And of course, we have a general meeting as they return during the upcoming year. They also have to sign a contract as well.
Would anyone else like to add to that?
I think that these two ideas are the important component with this, just to have a process. Whatever, however you structure it, that together with the administration you work to have some sort of a process that everybody's comfortable with. And of course, we want to remember that there's AP potential, mm-hmm. that you can always access, that will give you some idea maybe of students that haven't been in the AP pipeline before. And that's one of our goals, is to find those students. Mm-hmm. So that's another important thing to consider.
Well, tell me this, how can we build better vertical teams within our schools? Stronger vertical teams in our schools.
I think it goes without saying that there needs to be a good deal of communication. The AP track is not necessarily one of those things where you can do the stereotypical shut the doors and do your own thing. There really does need to be something of a logical progression from 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. I mean, if nothing else, to make sure you don't overlap things. But just staying open, sharing ideas. It sounds so basic, but it really is true.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You actually need to talk to your colleagues.
That has happened very effectively this year. at Bryan Adams in the fact that we have had our AP meetings with our departmental meetings. We have been a part of that. And as a part of that, regular teachers as well as pre-AP teachers have complimented the fact that that has happened and they know what's going on. And as I've always said before, when regular teachers teach the strategies of AP, we will see success on all tests. And that has been such a reward for the AP vertical team for us to be there, stress the strategies that we teach to those regular teachers as well as pre-AP. And this has made for a good camaraderie of AP teachers and an AP vertical team.
That also has to filter down to our feeder schools as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
And we have to really work hard to maintain a relationship with those teachers. It's a difficult thing to do sometimes because we get so busy on both sides. But if we can maintain that, and we'll establish it first and then maintain it, we can really see some big differences.
I would also add that training at the pre-AP and the AP level for teachers is extremely important in terms of building the vertical team. So.
I see it even more so now that STARS is coming on the scene, especially with our ninth graders, because they're having to learn to write different types of writing discourses instead of just the typical narrative essays. And it's forcing them to actually pick up some writing skills that you would normally see taught in a pre-AP class as well for writing. So with our vertical team, we meet also with the entire English department. And so I get a chance to meet with the pre-AP teachers on the side as far as seeing what they're doing so that we can plan what needs to be taught on each level before that student gets to the next grade level.
The next question, what can be done for a student who is in AP but lacks the ability or the work ethic to be successful? What could be done?
That should be done ahead of time. That should be done in the form of a contract. That student, that parent of that student should know what is expected of him. If he does not meet the criteria of that contract after 6 weeks, 12 weeks, then a meeting with parents, counselors, and the powers that be who determine who should come out or who should go into an AP class would make that decision.
And those standards have to be continually pushed to the students. They have to know that they're going to have to perform.
Right.
This is not a situation where they can just do what they feel like doing. They must work.
I think students and parents together need to consider how much time they can give to AP at the high school level. Some of these students sign up for 3 or 4 courses AP, but then they go straight from school to work, and that's just a heavy burden on them. So I think there needs to be some good counseling about, you know, the old adage of how many hours inside a college class you spend X number of hours outside. So I think that understanding and expectation needs to be clear.
That's part of our parent meeting. We make sure when we meet with the parents, with the students, that they understand at the beginning of the year they have 3 weeks. 3 weeks. During that 3-week period, if they see that the workload is a little too much for them and it's too challenging, they can't do it, and conference with them, with the teachers, with the counselors, with parent, and the student has a chance to come out. But if it's
administrative support.
Right. And if it's after that 3-week period and student wants to stick in there, that means that child is admitting, I'm willing to go overboard beyond the call of duty in order to survive in this class.
How can less achieving schools be paired or grouped with more successful teachers' schools through tutoring or some structured activity to help improve AP scores? And when they say less achieving here, I'm assuming they mean perhaps their scores are not as high as some of the other high schools. Is there a way, do you think, that we could group schools so that in tutoring or something of that fashion? Could you talk about that a little bit?
We've actually, in the past had some success with having some of the schools that are close to us join forces, if you will, for Saturday sessions that were not necessarily district sessions, but were like review sessions for our individual students. And so we've invited people from other schools to come on over. A lot of our kids know each other from different schools, and so in some cases, it's simply a matter of if X school is offering a Super Saturday, if any of my students would like to go to it, this is when they're going to hold it, this is who you need to go see, that sort of thing, and then obviously let the other school know. But if you have that kind of agreement ahead of time, you can almost share resources, because we can't be every Saturday, at school, but if I could be there one Saturday and you might be able to be there another, we might be able to hit some students that couldn't necessarily attend one or the other. And the other thing is that it's kind of amazing that I can say the same thing all year long, but then they hear the same thing from someone else's voice, and it's like, oh, really? Wow, I should write that down.
Never heard that before.
Never heard that. It's amazing. And so it validates, from the student. Well, he's been saying that all year. It must be true. So it works both ways.
Is transportation ever an issue?
Again, it's the ones we've done in the past would be where we're like on the borderline anyway. We've had, at Woodrow we had North Dallas come by. At one point we had been talking about Brian Adams sharing resources as well, and we're all right next to each other. I think maybe, it might be a little bit of a stretch to go all, across the Adamson, but there's no reason why we couldn't if we arranged it. So.
I think the more our program grows, which is what we wanted to do, this is a direction we might really consider as a group of AP teachers from the schools, and the Saturdays. The Saturdays we choose are so few when we have the big all district prep session that may hit on something where the student can attend. But if we knew that, Molina's having a 9 to 12 prep session, with prior knowledge, anybody that wants to come, let them know. And I think as a group of teachers, we could look into that. With the budget cuts and, the seriousness of the situation, bus transportation is not available as readily as it was. So I think that's something we need to, as a district,
and our AP lead instructors have done a lot to show us that these models can work. The way that they move around to different schools and work with new teachers especially, that kind of formula can come together, no doubt.
Right, but I hadn't thought about it, Brad, but pairing a newer teacher with a more experienced teacher at 2 or 3 schools would be a great Saturday situation.
Okay, let's switch gears a little here and talk about summer reading. How can we better ensure that students will read the assigned summer reading? Do we have any ideas on that?
That's a tough one.
I'm going to try something different this summer. This year I've actually started putting blogs online. We've got a special blog for language and lit students, and they are so excited when they have to get a chance to go online and post on the blog. So I'm going to utilize that this summer. So with their summer reading, I will have email addresses and I will be communicating with them via technology, and we'll get an opportunity to tell them they got a blog online every other week or something like that. Depending on how many chapters I tell them to cover in the book, and see if that will entice them to do a little bit more reading.
At the end of the school year, I meet with all the sophomores, and they get my email, but I also get all of their emails. And so my list is already set at the summer, and then they are required to email me a certain amount of times over the summer over the novel that they're reading. And then once they email me, then I know that we're in contact now, and then I email them back another set of questions. They have to send me a question, I answer the question and send them another question. They have to email me 3 times basically over the summer, and we have this little conversation that goes back and forth.
That's great.
But the nice thing is that when I look at my list and I see the kids that I have not contacted me, then I can contact them and say, you haven't contacted me, And normally I can get them.
This is always an issue, and I've sort of done a lot of research online, just looking at what other schools do. And one of the components, and I've done this, you know, at various times, I think the kids need to be responsible maybe for some hard copy thing in addition to just reading the book. It could be an interesting art project or just something that would be more than just saying read the book and show up with the book. And I know that some of the language classes do, you know, looking at editorials over the summer and doing something like that. So I think there needs to be some component that is more than just read the book.
Now, a couple of summers ago, we did Fast Food Nation.
Right.
And the students actually had to create a documentary video. So after having read it, that was part of a project they had to come into the school year with. So it was quite interesting. They got put out a few fast food restaurants, but one of them actually fed them. So they had all of that on video when they brought the documentary to class at the beginning of the school year. So it was very interesting.
Teachers might also remember that the 500 and 600 page novel turns off the student. If you can let yourself assign smaller novels, they will read more actively and they will come to class with more information. And some teachers just can't come to that point, that less is more. And we teach that less is more in AP all the time because we do not have to teach 25 or 30 novels where 2 or 3 will be sufficient if we do it well.
Okay, and while we're on the topic of reading, what about reading comprehension? How do we improve the students' reading comprehension so that they can get the most out of that text? What are some of the things that you do in class?
I give them certain things to do. If I give a cutting from the novel, or if I give them a short story to read, or a poem to read, and I say you cannot get into this poem or this prose to analyze it, then you must have handles out there that you can use, such as what is puzzling about this? What is surprising about it? What is? You have to give them open-ended ideas in order for them to get into the text and then come back to you with good discussion.
Anyone else?
One of the things I'm trying to do now is to use the internet more. So I'll ask a couple of weird leading questions. You know, go look up this guy. You know, go look up this concept. Tell me what this is. Be ready to talk about it next time. And then when I give it to them, they'll know that, oh, that little sidebar thing, you know, I'm supposed to know about that. Oh, that was that thing I just read, and sometimes that kind of shoehorns them into something when I don't necessarily have a lot of time to stop the class and say, okay, well, you know, let's go back in history and look at that. And then, so that it's kind of an interesting way to. I'm having mixed success with it, so it's kind of an interesting thing that I'm trying to put out there. You know, to get them to, you know, to understand that there's more to their reading than simply something on the page. It's, you know, there are other things that went and influenced it and have extra meanings behind it and everything else. There's that. There's also the there's a dictionary of illusions out there, which is kind of a fun resource to have in class. And if you get the deer in the headlight looks like, you know, I have no idea what you're talking about, then you're going to say, okay, first one to get it out of the dictionary, give it to me, and they'll pop open the thing and look for it. So you can do little scavenger hunts like that. Sometimes, if you know, you put enough emphasis on it, well, this was actually really important, you really should have looked this up. You know, if they've had the text ahead of time, that is. Then it reinforces the idea, oh, I should probably look these things up more often.
Right. I think that just reviewing every year, you know, reading on the line, between the line, and you know, beyond the line, and doing a little practice with that, and giving them, Peggy says handles, I like that term. The idea of, you know, look for a pattern. If you're having a little trouble pulling this together, what's a pattern that you see going on in these 5 paragraphs or these 3 paragraphs or this poem? You know, just one thing for them. Do you find anything that seems sort of a contrast or irony or something like that? You know, maybe something they can key in on, and then everything else maybe falls into place a little bit.
Yes, we know that the multiple choice questions, that a lot of those, well, all of them have to do with reading comprehension to be able to answer the questions. And so when they select answers incorrectly, you know, we make them write rationales for why they selected this particular answer, and make them show some sort of logic of why they selected this particular answer. And, you know, just that you're just not reading passively, that as Peggy said, you're looking for patterns, you're looking for handles and that kind of thing. Make them write rationales.
Rationales and incentives for reading deeply into the material, and slowing down to speed up is what I always tell them. You know, that they can do so much more if they would just slow down just a little bit and focus. And now and then you just kind of have to make a project out of a few kids, you know, where you're making sure that you're checking on them. And even when they're doing a timed multiple choice, sometimes I will stop them and say, where are you right here? You know, where are you right now? And just to see if they can get them to tell me. And a lot of times they can't, because they're doing that same thing again under those time situations where they're just running through there as quickly as they possibly can, fighting the clock when I need them to slow down. And a lot of kids, by the end of the year, they figure out how to do that.
A lot of the students do not like to annotate either.
Right.
What they want to do is they want to answer the question. They want to read the passage and answer the questions, when really they need to annotate in order to zero in on the specific things that they need. And so that's something else, annotation. And then they probably need to make sure that they kind of stop after every paragraph and think about what they're reading. A lot of them will get to the end of the passage almost and they won't know anything. And so it's like you said, the act of reading that they need.
Well, the act of reading to that is to have students always read the first sentence and the last sentence. And if they do that, if it's a good piece of writing, which they wouldn't be studying if it wasn't,
Right.
Then that usually ties a thematic idea together with that piece of work.
Right.
And then go back and read that passage and connect the patterns that follow through with it.
Right.
And with that, then they can come up with a thematic statement.
Right.
And if that's not done, then they are not going to be able to answer correctly in the objective test. That's what we really don't get across, I think, sometimes, that annotation is important in analysis, but annotation is just as important in the objective test.
That's right. It is. It is.
And I think,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say modeling,
Right.
you know, showing those students how to annotate, because underlining and highlighting is not annotating.
Right.
No.
And so, you know, if you do it enough on the overhead, the smart board, whatever, if you do enough of that, maybe it'll cross over.
What I first semester especially, before giving them an actual multiple choice, I would pull out the vocab words, some words I know that they're going to have some issues with, even some terms in the answer choices, and teach that prior to giving them the actual multiple choice test. And then when they get the test and they see those terms, they get excited. They feel a little smart.
I do that
kind of
too.
boost their ego a bit. So, oh, I know that. Okay, and they attack it a little bit more comfortable than they would had I not given them that time with those vocab words prior to the test.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up vocab words, terms. How do you deal with the terminology, the AP terminology, whether it be the literature exam or the language exam? How do you deal with that in the classroom?
Okay, terminology as in?
As in the language exam, you have your own terminology for the language exam. You know, some of the words, anaphora, so forth and so on. And then there's different terminology, of course, for the literature exam. How do you deal with all of that within that 1 year? How do you teach that?
I think you have to teach it in context. You know, that they'll memorize the term, but when you're working with something, I think sometimes you just have to say, wow, look in this paragraph, do you all see that paradox? Do you see this? Because they can memorize the terms, but then they cannot apply them.
Right.
So again, I think it's that modeling. You know, here's your list of terms, guys. This is what you need to know. You know, these are on the multiple choice part of the exam. When you're writing your essays, if you can use these appropriately, not to throw them in as a $5 term, but you know, can you use it? And so that's why I think it can't be an artificial thing.
And that's kind of the problem. A lot of the students want to use the $5 terms. They want to sound smart. They want to sound like they know what they're doing, and they do. But the bigger trick is, you know, if they can't remember the fancy term, can they describe what the thing does?
Connect it to meaning.
They don't remember what an AFRA is, but they recognize that there's a repetition of certain key words, you know, again and again. That is just as valid in the analysis as knowing that it's an AFRA. So.
And certainly with, in the realm of what the teacher should do, we should use terminology. We should not say vocabulary. We should say diction, because you don't see that term vocabulary on the test. So the more that we can use the terminology that is used on the test as syntax for sentence structure, as diction for vocabulary, etc., then with the student hearing that in the classroom at all times, then they're going to pick it up more and use it themselves.
Especially when we use the different forms of those words.
Yes.
And if we can, you know, use that a lot, show them that they can, you know, that they can, there are several different ways that they can use that same term. And once they figure out how to do that, then it doesn't sound like they're using the $1 million word so often. It's a little smoother. That's where their mistakes happen most of the time.
Yes.
Okay, this is mostly, I think, geared towards the language teachers. Some teachers teach little to no fiction. Some teach a great deal of fiction, including both early and recent American works as well as novels. What is the best approach? I've been advised to teach no fiction. I've also had friends and colleagues say that it's ridiculous not to include fiction. What is your position on this? Actually, the College Board has a position on this.
Yeah, I think the College Board's position was that they don't dictate what you teach, so you're pretty much free to do whatever you want. But as far as what I would suggest, it would be whatever material you're comfortable with, as long as you're getting across the objectives. I don't think there's any kind of set, you must do this much nonfiction, you must do this much fiction, etc. I mean, if the object is to figure out what the rhetorical purpose of the author is, you can do that just as easily, and I do it in Heart of Darkness, as I can do it in FDR's Fireside Chats. You know, you can still pick out what it is they're trying to get at, what it is they're trying to do. In fiction, I mean, there's a rhetorical point to all of it. So do whatever fits for your plan. I mean, if you've got an overall theme, like if you're following along with the American literary track or whatever, you're necessarily going to have some things in there that might not necessarily be covered specifically by, I mean, that might be better a fit for AP Lit as opposed to AP Language. But if you get at what is the author trying to do in the course of the literature, there's no reason why they can't do fiction.
Yeah, I believe that they should do fiction, you know, but I also believe that the test is basically nonfiction. And because it's basically nonfiction, sometimes I think that the kids don't get enough of that, you know, early on in the 9th and 10th grade. So it's although I believe it's a good idea to teach the fiction, I think it should be mostly nonfiction.
You can't do without it, you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to have nonfiction, but you don't have to necessarily exercise everything that is fictitious.
As a junior teacher, I also, though, feel like I kind of have a responsibility to my senior teachers to continue, working with them with literature. So you do have to do that.
You do have to do it.
Although it is primarily a nonfiction.
It's primarily a nonfiction course.
I would pull in a fictional piece based on whatever theme I'm covering for that 6 weeks. With all of the non-fictional material, I will pull in a fictional piece in order to sort of drive home the setting of the time period that we're studying and so forth and so on, and attitude of the characters, how it ties in with the fictional piece as well, with the non-fictional selections that we're dealing with.
You know, working with them with literature, so
Right.
you do have to do that.
You do have to do it.
Although it is primarily a non-fiction.
It's primarily a nonfiction
Normally
course.
I would
Unlike
pull in
work.
a fictional piece based on whatever theme I'm covering for that 6 weeks. With all of the non-fictional material, I will pull in a fictional piece in order to sort of drive home the setting of the time period that we're studying and so forth and so on, and the attitude of the characters, how it ties in with the fictional piece as well, with the non-fictional selections that we're dealing with. So I will pull in maybe one or two of them per semester rather, in order to tie them into the theme. So it'll give the kids a greater understanding of what we're dealing with the non-fiction pieces.
Right.
So
These are short pieces.
Yes.
That you wrote, 'cause
Yes.
we did one long
Yes.
work,
I
one
think
long
it-
work of fiction. And
I think it goes back to Patrick's opening statement. It's got to be the expertise of the teacher to know what my ultimate goal is with this. And, you know, how has the author used his craft to create? And whether it's fiction or nonfiction, as long as we keep that goal in mind rather than what's the story about, you know.
Okay, how do you handle the need for remediation when your students' essays are so weak? What do you do for remediation when their essays are so weak?
Take a good essay, model it before the class. Take a 4 essay, make it a 5, make it a 6, and show the students how you do that. And with the models, they can follow. And they have to study good essays that are in the 6-7 range. We know they have to be in that upper range to make a passing grade on the AP test. So my theory is never give them a lower essay as a model. Give them something like a 5 that you can make a 6, or a 6 that you can make a 7. But modeling is the key to it. Get it on the overhead and show them how to make that assertion, find the evidence in the piece, and then make the commentary. And that's just not one time in one paragraph. That you need to stress that you have to have at least 2 to 3 of those assertions to build that paragraph and from the annotation to a well-developed analysis.
I totally agree with everything she just said. I actually, when I give an actual essay, have them write it, show them a model, and then I've pilfered a little technique from Shirley here with the highlighters. I use the pink when it's good and the yellow if there's some issues with it, but I don't write notes on it on the first time. I give it to them, and then they have to come sit with me one-on-one for tutoring after school, and then we talk about why the yellow is there and why the pink is there, because okay, what did I do right? Okay, what did I do that I need to fix? And even sometimes I will remove the names from those papers and I will show them on the Word doc machine and let the class look at the samples, look at the papers too, so that they can see what's good about this and what needs to be fixed. So they never know whose paper it is, and so it helps a whole lot.
Well, I think every approved by College Board AP syllabus is not approved unless it stresses rewrite and draft and draft. And so, you know, by December, if students are only writing 5s consistently, I think that's when they come in and you work with them. What can we do? You know, 2 things can we do to move this up? Let's get the scoring guide out, look at the scoring guide and see. What does it say for the 5? Now, what can we do to move it to the 6? And again, the one-on-one, sometimes, you know, 3 or 4 students are sort of stuck in that land of 5.
And you can't let them off the hook.
Right.
You know, when they do a rewrite, if the rewrite's still not strong, they need to do another rewrite. I mean, they have to continue writing. And I learned this from my old senior English teacher right here.
Red! Talk about that.
Hey, you know, she made me write and write and write. And that was something that I had to do.
Look at you today.
Very good.
You're great.
Okay, here's another question on writing. Should templates be used, formulas, to teach writing?
Okay. I hate templates because templates will generate formulaic writing that is the same thing over and over again. On the other hand, I love templates because templates give the kids who someplace to start. If they don't know the format, they can at least fall back and say, okay, well, I know I've got to do an introduction, I have to have some context before the pieces, and so they can go through and they can crank something out that in revision we can make better. But if they can't get it on the paper, then it doesn't matter. So it's a love-hate relationship.
Yeah. Teachers should also remember, I think, that you don't have to teach that whole essay at one time. Start with the thesis, go from the thesis to the conclusion, and set up a model for the